Good Saturday morning. This is I guess this is the end of the 13th chapter. This is, again, it's the analogy of the sower and the seed. I love the very last line here, the end of it. It's the divine patience. See? He says, the kingdom of heaven be like in a man who sowed good seed in the field. While everyone was asleep, his enemy came, think of the devil, and sowed weeds all through the wheat, and then went off, corrupting it. Think of it, corrupting the church. When the crop grew and bore fruit, the weeds appeared as well. The slaves of the household came to him and said, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where have the weeds come from? He answered, an enemy has done this. The slave said to him, do you want us to go and pull them up? He replied, no, if you pull up the weeds, you might uproot the wheat along with them. Let them grow together till harvest. Then at harvest time I will say to the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them, throw them in bundles for burning, but gather the wheat into my barn. See? I think of, who sowed the seeds, the weeds. Well, in many ways the devil, but also, it's also the human heart. See? And I think what our Lord and God is saying is that He is patient with us as we struggle with both the weeds and the wheat in our heart. I mean that. None of us are perfect. That field is not a perfect field of wheat. It is not. But it is the conflict. The human heart is the conflict between good and evil, vice and virtue. And it's the inner struggle. We spend all our lives growing either in faith and virtue, or disbelief and vice. We never stay constant. We grow in maturity or we grow in immaturity. Can you grow in immaturity? Sure you can. You become more selfish. Certainly the challenge of any human relationship is one in which you either grow in intimacy or you don't, or you grow apart, sometimes in grave hostility. The enemy of excellence is not evil, but mediocrity. Is the sowing the seeds of vice and the gradually growing. The ancients saw this stuff so well. I think of Aristotle more than even Plato. When his theory of the virtue and the vices, he knew we practice virtues, we grow in virtue, but he also knew if you don't and you practice vice, there's no place in between. You're either going to grow or you're not. You're going to grow one way or the other. And if you grow in the vices, they become habits of self-violence, self-destruction. You see? And in the end, you reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. I think of that very much. I think what Aristotle saw is also the gospel 4 centuries later. You sow, as you sow, so shall you reap. As you cultivate virtues, you will prosper in the flourishing of your life. You will flourish in your life. You keep practicing virtues and vices. God, I'm having a terrible time here. You will die alone. This great symbol of it. As you choose, you send into motion both habits of the heart and creating habits of the heart, and also circumstances in life which begin to determine you. If you want to see that in the great movies, watch Godfather 1 and 2. Not so much 3, but 1 and 2. 3 is is not as well done, but the final scene is the ultimate scene. Michael dies alone. I tell my kids that in class all the time. If you practice virtue, you will have love in your life because you will be a faithful companion. Practice selfishness and vice and you'll die alone. One of the things, I've seen that so often, like the failures of marriage, the failures of relationship is the vice of selfishness fostered and nurtured. Selfishness, always out for yourself. What's in it for me? What's in it for me? Okay, keep asking that question. You get what you get. Nothing. You get you. That's what you're going to get. Do you ever ask what's in it for her? What's in it for him? You ask what's in it for me? What's in it for you? You ask the question to your spouse. You ask yourself this question, regard to your spouse. What's in it for her? What's in it for him? What can I do for her, for him, to make her happy? Not what's in it for me. What's going to make her happy? You will develop virtues of love, tenderness, sensitivity, hearing, not be deaf to the silent voice of your partner in life. listen to your own voice, you blot out all the other voices. I have to say that what I've seen in my pastoral life, I see my own, that the vices that are fostered become the vices of self-destruction. You, in a sense, I put it symbolically, you live and finally die alone. No one cares because you never cared. That's just simply true. And yet you see with somebody who was far from perfect, but was always somebody who gave themselves, tried to give themselves, and you see that they died with their family with them. That's the truth. They were loved because they did love, imperfectly, but they loved. But the person who fostered selfishness, self-interest and selfishness, I have to say, in my life experience, they die alone because they were dead a long time. They just didn't know it. They were dead a long time. It is so, Aristotle saw that education is supposed to be the development of virtue. He was absolutely right. You develop virtue from the time a child is born. You foster the virtues. If you don't, the vices are powerful instruments. They will take over. The vices will mature as well. We call it original sin. It's a recognition that human character is inherently flawed. Okay, then you got to choose. Do you live virtuously and that way compensating for those flaws and enhancing it in the Christian gospel? Or do you foster the dark side? If you do, that original sin becomes a pervasive sin, the sin of selfishness and vice. In the end, you don't have to be a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim to believe this. You just have to have 2 cents worth of knowledge. And in some bit of observation, you see you die alone. You die alone. Sometimes you get lucky. Somebody reminds you that you're not what you're supposed to be. Sometimes you're lucky, but not always. And then even there, it often hits dead ears. And that's the sad, and that's the tragic part of life. You destroy yourself by your own doing. And it creates, a deafness to what is good and possible, still good and possible in you. It's a failure to recognize who and what you are, but rather you live the character that you created. And that character often is vicious, not beautiful, but vicious. And that's the truth. That's the truth.